Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are above replacement radio. And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Giant. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. It's been a season of us being wrong all the time. And how does this season end? With us being wrong, drastically wrong, about how this World Series was going to go in Arizona.
Yes. We hopped on the podcast after game 2, and we were pretty excited because it was a split in those first 2 games. It was going back to Arizona, and we were like, man, this is going to be competitive. Like game 1 was a great sign of what's to come, and we're going to see this no doubt come back to Texas. And the only team coming back to Texas is the Rangers to celebrate the championship that they've just won. Yeah,
the Rangers, they won all 3 games in Arizona. I didn't think a team was going to win all 3. You didn't think a team was going to win all 3, but that's exactly what happened. They won both games 3 and 5 on like really good pitching and timely offense. And game 4 was just, I know it was only a 4-run game, but it was a blowout effectively.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they got out to a 11-0 lead early on, 10-0 in the first 3 innings. Yeah, after such a wild season, with so many unexpected results, that continues, and the Rangers win here in 5 instead of 6 or 7, and it was a little bit anticlimactic, a little bit, just kind of, the first like 7 innings were it was a good game in
8
game
innings
5,
even.
but first 8 innings even, yeah. And then but it ends up being a 5-0 ball game, and it ends in 5 games, but it's something where you have to be happy. You have to be extremely happy for the Rangers fan base.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first World Series championship in franchise history. There are now only 5 teams in Major League Baseball that have yet to win a World Series, being the Brewers, the Padres, the Rockies, the Mariners, and the Rays. And yeah, Rangers fans, it's been a long time coming. I mean, if you were around in 2011, you've probably never stopped thinking about it. I mean, the one joke I made last night was for the 3rd time in franchise history, the Rangers are 1 out away from winning the World Series. Of course, it's the first time they actually came through on it. And it's definitely a feel-good story for a lot of those fans. There was that picture of Adrian Beltre holding the trophy, which made me really happy, and I'm sure it made all baseball fans happy because, he was on that 2011 team, that came oh so close to winning it. And he's, been with the Rangers ever since as a player and in the front office. There's a lot of players to be happy for. Corey Seager won World Series MVP again for the 2nd time in his career, which is pretty remarkable. And yeah, I mean, I think it's it's definitely a result that I'm very happy with.
Yeah, for sure. Either way, it was going to be some sort of feel good story going on, whether it be the Diamondbacks or the Rangers. Neither of us have any memory really of either team winning. The Diamondbacks won in our lifetimes, but we're too young to remember that. But with the Rangers, literally,
yeah.
With the Rangers, literally, they had never won it, and they've been around since 1961. They've been in Texas since 1972. So yeah, it's a big thing, and obviously we kind of remember a little bit 2011 and how heartbreaking that was, and just the level of despair that had to go on, at Busch Stadium in those in that game 6. So I'm sure there's obviously always the bad memories of that, but now they finally have one. And just to get into kind of a game by game recap of games 3, 4, and 5. In game 3, the Rangers get out to a 3-0 lead in what was it, the third inning? Yeah, and it was another Corey Seager home run that made it 3-0.
Mhm.
Because I feel like I have my Corey Seager home runs in different orders. I just forget
Yeah.
when he hit which ones, and I know he hit a bunch, but
Yeah, so the Rangers scored all 3 of their runs in the third inning, uh, in that game, and yeah, it was a Nathaniel Lowe double, a Marcus Semien single to bring him in, and then Corey Seager hit a 2-run home run. It was hit 114 miles per hour. Somehow only had a 980 expected batting average, despite being out in all 30 ballparks.
yeah.
Not
Um,
sure how that one worked, but it did.
well, yeah, it's because expected statistics don't account for what part of the ballpark you hit it in, whereas
Yeah.
those those metrics, the 30 out of 30 ballparks does account for where you hit it in the ballpark. So yeah, it can be weird like that. And then in game 3, Max Scherzer goes 3 innings and then has to come out with back tightness. He went 3 shutout innings, and then it's a bullpen game a little bit for the Rangers. But John Gray comes through big, 3 innings, 3 innings, no runs, no walks, 1 hit, 3 strikeouts, a 33% called strike and whiff rate, and 1 batted ball in the sweet spot zone out of 7, which is a really, really low percentage. Yeah, John Gray really came through in a moment he probably didn't expect to have to come through in.
Yeah, he did. He was actually slated to start game 4, and all of a sudden it's, oh, by the way, we need you out there right now, actually, because I don't know if he was even warming up. Like Serger kind of came out very abruptly in that game. He threw 1 warm-up pitch in the 4th, and that was it for him. So, they had to get him up very impromptu, and yeah, three shutout innings with 1 hit and 3 strikeouts, a 33% called strike and whiff rate. Uh, Excellent outing from him. Yeah, on quite literally zero notice. And
Yeah,
that's a guy that's a starter too. It's not like he's used to. I know he's relieved a little bit in these playoffs, but he's not used to having his name called like that in the bullpen. So to make that adjustment on the fly in the World Series and to come through, that means something.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, he just wasn't wasn't expecting it at all. And it was a close game. It was a competitive game. It's, he didn't have too much room for error. It could have easily blown up in his face a little bit, but puts out a really, really strong performance with those 3 shutout innings. And then the rest of the bullpen also continues to do their work. The rest of the bullpen outside of Gray went 3 shutout innings with 5 strikeouts and no walks. It was a master class by the Rangers bullpen for sure.
Yeah, it absolutely was. Overall, 6 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 run allowed, no walks and 8 strikeouts, which is pretty remarkable. Um, Through 6 innings. Yeah, I mean the Diamondbacks did score 1 run kind of late, and they did. No, there was some questionable umpiring at points, but I mean, like the Rangers played very timely defense. They got that really good double play in the 8th inning to end that. Ketel Marte hit a ball 114 miles an hour. That was fielded nicely by Seager. Um, that was obviously very well done.
Yeah, it was a very important play. I imagine it probably had to be one of the more impactful plays in terms of win probability. If I just double check here
Hmm.
on Baseball Reference, because yeah, I mean a double play in which the team who grounds into that double play is down 2 and kind of in a good situation where they only have 1 out. Yeah, it definitely makes
It was the
for.
third, according to Baseball Savant, it was the third most impactful play of the game.
Yeah, I think on Baseball Reference it's tied for second for 10%. It increased the Rangers' chances of winning by 10% that one play. So yeah, pretty impactful for sure. Um so yeah, the Rangers come through, and Rangers bullpen comes through, as well as their offense in the timely moments, and they win game 3. Then game 4, it is what was it?
10-0
Androfini.
after the third.
Yes. 10-0 after the third.
Yeah, I mean that one just looked tough. There's a lot of discourse going on about the Diamondbacks doing a bullpen game in the World Series. Clearly none of the people arguing that watched the game in the NLCS where they did the exact same thing and won. And if they didn't, they might not have made it to the World Series. Um, and even still, I mean, I know Ryan Nelson pitched very well in relief, but it was in garbage time. They were already down for most of that, and I mean, like, who else did the Diamondbacks have? I mean, I know that Ryan Nelson, like I said, pitched well. He would have been the guy to start Game 4, but I think we would have gotten the same reaction regardless.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Nelson just overall this season had an ERA and FIP over 5. Um, I think you just generally would rather just take the bullpen game. And if Ryan Nelson were to go out and pitch for the Diamondbacks and start for them, it was probably going to be on a very short leash anyway, and it probably would have been an inevitable bullpen game, if he's only going 2 or 3 innings. So
Yeah, and to his credit, he pitched well in relief, 5 1/3 innings, 3 hits, 1 run, no walks, and 6 strikeouts. I mean, obviously that's a good start, but uh, I mean, he came into relief when it was already 10-0.
yeah, for sure, for sure. It's definitely not the same stakes, and you can't say for sure that he would have done that if he was starting the game. Um, it's hard to judge that for sure. And a stat you put down regarding the Rangers offense and their 11 runs scored. The Rangers offense also had 15 hard hit balls in game 4, which are tied for 6th most in a World Series game in the StatCast era. And they had a 51.7% hard hit rate, which was 11th highest in the StatCast era. So, and I imagine a lot of that activity happened in the first few innings. They really came to hit. And I think that was like one of the first instances we saw the Arizona bullpen sort of show some weakness. Um, you know, we hadn't really seen much of that before. I guess maybe the Paul Sewald blown save, but that was against Corey Seager specifically. It hasn't been. We haven't really seen the Diamondbacks bullpen as a whole kind of lose it like that in a game.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was tough for the Diamondbacks late in that game. And really just in every game. I mean, the bullpen was a question mark during the regular season. It got a lot better in the throughout the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and in the World Series it kind of just crumbled.
yeah, it was not the same as it was against Philadelphia or LA. Just didn't have the same effect necessarily. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it was sort of due to happen. Because it's given the names and how they did in the regular season, it was hard. It was going to be hard for them to keep keep that pace up heading into the series. And yeah, I mean, in a bullpen game, you're not going specifically only to your 3 best bullpen guys, like for example, Sewald or Thompson um or Kevin Ginkel. Like, you're going to some of your 6th or 7th options, and unfortunately they were not able to get the job done in game 4. So yeah, the Rangers win 11-7 after it was kind of funny. There was a
Yeah,
little bit of a scare.
Lourdes Gurriel Jr. hit a big 3-run homer.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a late game.
Which by the way, that was the only home run the D-backs hit in games 3, 4, and 5.
Right,
And
right,
it
that's true.
was what was the score at the time of it?
Um,
Like 11-2.
I think 11-2, yeah.
Yeah, they
And he
made it
killed the
11.
rally.
Yeah, 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 and he killed it. Most importantly, yeah.
Um, would have been much better off with a little base hit through the hole there.
Yeah.
Killed the rally, unfortunately. Um, yeah, I believe it was 11-2, made it 11-5, and then
The win probability didn't change according to Baseball Savant. Texas was still at 100% when he hit it.
wow, Makes sense. It was a 6-run game in the eighth.
Yeah.
And then yeah, they scored two more in the ninth, and the Rangers eventually win. Don't pull off the another great heartbreak and blow an 11-run lead. They do not do that. So that moves on to game 5, which was pretty cool. Gallon versus Eovaldi, kind of in their own respective ways, very interesting shutout performances, or at least for the first 6 innings. Gallon had a lot of hard contact that was, stopped at the warning track and caught. Eovaldi put a lot of guys on base, but never allowed them to come in. What were your how are you kind of processing those, like, first 6 innings of baseball?
It was, yeah. I mean, it was a pitcher's duel that of two pitchers pitching very differently, right? Gallon had a no hitter going through sixth. He looked unbelievable. I mean, yeah, he hadn't allowed a hit going into the sixth inning. Only one walk, one base runner allowed at all. And he had gotten away with some hard contact that had that was hitting the right place for him, but um, finally, he ended up getting hit a little bit. And for Evaldi, I mean, he allowed 5 walks in that game and 4 hits in the first 5 innings. He didn't allow a hit in his last inning. Uh, yeah, he allowed the D-backs to get 9 plate appearances with runners in scoring position. Actually, 10 technically, but 9 counted because one was a sac bunt that we'll get into. And they went 0 for 9. So, I mean, you can count that as Evaldi escaped. You can count that as like he got a little lucky. But regardless, for two pitchers with very similar lines in that game, they pitched very differently.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Gallon only had one walk compared to Eovaldi's 5. Um, Gallon, I think, pitched far less with runners on base than Eovaldi did, but in those first 6 innings, got the same result as it goes for the scoreboard. And then in the 7th inning, Corey Seager gets on with by really placing it in the exact right spot. And this is not how Corey Seager usually gets on. He usually gets on with a really hard, barrel or something like that. Whereas in the 7th inning, Corey Seager hit against the modified shift. There was the third baseman was playing around the shortstop area. Seager hits it kind of closer to the left field line. It was hit 67 miles per hour and had an expected batting average of 120. So a 12% chance of being a hit, but he found the right spot. And then Evan Carter takes a hanging breaking ball and lines it into the gap for a double to make it second and third. And then finally, Mitch Garver comes in and hits a really, really hard ground ball through the hole up the middle for a base hit. And it was hit so hard that Evan Carter was not able to score on it. He was stopped at third. And eventually, the Diamondbacks actually get out of it.
Evan Ginkel, he was great all postseason.
Yeah, exactly. And always an entertaining watch. You always knew when you got that last out. You could always tell.
Yeah. So the Diamondbacks played the entire postseason very analytic based, right? I mean, they removed Brandon Pfaadt from Game 3 of the NLCS when he was dealing. They did a bullpen game in Game 4, both in the World Series and in the NLCS, and it got them to where they eventually got to. But for whatever reason, they just decided to escape all of that in Game 5 with so many just questionable decisions that went against everything that they had gone through throughout the rest of the postseason. The biggest one, and they did this a few times in the World Series, but I mean, the most egregious example of Game 5 was bunting the 3-hitter in the 3rd inning, which is insane to me. So Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte both reached base to begin the 3rd inning. So they were men on first and second with no one out. Gabriel Moreno coming up. And for whatever reason, Torey Lovello decided to bunt him, and eventually the runners did not score. Even if it worked, I still would have criticized this bunt because that's an outlandish thing to do. You have, when you're facing elimination, you have 27 outs to work with until your season ends. You got to make the most of those 27 outs, and to give one of them away with one of your best hitters is a irrefutably bad decision. Even like the people that defend bunting were questioning it last night. It was it was one of the worst decisions I've seen in a World Series game, certainly. And you definitely wonder if it might have cost the D-backs a couple runs because, I mean, I think there's a lot more momentum going their way if they're up 1-0 or 2-0 in those late innings.
Right, for sure. And you know, for anyone thinking about what the bunt means, for the run expectancy between having men on first and second base with nobody out, and the difference between that and having men on second and third and one out, the run expectancy actually goes down when you're second and third and one out. And I imagine, and that doesn't account for who's up at the plate. So with Gabriel Moreno being up with first, men on first and second and nobody out, that run expectancy is even higher for a situation where you have first and second and nobody out. So yeah, I mean, and ultimately, even if the Diamondbacks came through and the next batter gets a 2-run single, it wouldn't have made that difference for them. And they would have lost. And I'm maybe I know that the energy is different when you're up 2-0 versus the other way around, but still it wouldn't it was very questionable. And there's a reason why teams generally don't do that. They don't generally bunt their 3-hitter with
Now,
men on first and second.
the logic for this, from what I understand, is that Torey Lovullo really wanted to get the crowd into it and really get the momentum going on his side early because teams that score first in the postseason won a lot of these games. And I think he had a quote that said like, "I'm gonna manage that first inning like a run scores a championship," and I think that's kind of how he wanted to do it there. But I mean, trying to settle for 1 or 2 runs in that situation is very questionable with that part of the order coming up.
So they have the bunt. They don't execute with men on second and third, even though it was successful bunt, but didn't execute in that situation because you kind of have to, you have that one opportunity where there's a guy 90 feet away, and you don't have to get a hit in order to get that guy across. But once it hits 2 outs, it's kind of anyone's game. So that doesn't happen. Then in the 7th inning, Zach Gallen allows his first base hit. And you said that they didn't have anybody warming at the time.
No, they didn't. They didn't have anyone warming up when he came after the 7th inning. Um, I don't disagree with bringing Zach Gallen after the 7th. I mean, he looked, one, it's like, I mean, not that this is on Torey Lovullo's mind, but it takes you away from the scrutiny of taking a guy out early, and having to avoid that discourse. Um, Obviously not on his mind, but I mean, he had been throwing a no hitter. He only had allowed one base runner. He had 9 strikeouts. Um, I mean, he looked good enough to keep going, and obviously he's your ace pitcher, so it makes reasonable sense. Um, but to not have anyone warming up is kind of absurd. I would have taken him out after the Seager base hit. I mean, if anything, he's lucky Seager didn't homer there and give Texas the lead because he's capable of doing that at any point. Um, and Torey Lovullo left him in. He gave up that double to Evan Carter, and he still left him in and let him give up that base hit to Mitch Garver. And then Kevin Giggle came in and got out of that jam. And you wonder maybe if he was in before a run had scored, there wouldn't have been a run on the board. And I mean that. Like I said, I think in an earlier game or with a different pitcher, the D-backs wouldn't have let him even go out for the 7th. But they got away from that. And the third time through the order discourse is, very prevalent nowadays, especially in the playoffs. And I get that it sucks that we get robbed of like deep pitching duels because managers don't let guys face the order a third time. But it's real. It's a real thing. You can't as good as Gallen looked, he looked like a different pitcher when the order saw him a third time. And that's just what it was.
Yeah, that is true. And statistically throughout the regular season at least, Gallon had the OPS against Gallon the second time through the order was 610, and the third time through the order it was 836. So his OPS against jumped 226 points from second time through the order through till third time through the order, and also batting average jumped from 216 to 295. So just all numbers kind of got worse third time through the order. But you do understand, everyone understands each situation comes a little differently. I don't fully blame Lovello for not taking him out after the Seager hit, because it was extremely weakly hit, and it found the right spot. But after the Carter double, especially that was a hanging breaking ball that was not well located. It didn't look like a pitch the Gallon was throwing all night. You really have to be prepared there in that situation. You have to have people warming, no matter who's pitching, no matter how many pitches a guy's at. When you're in an elimination game, you need to have guys warming in the sixth inning and beyond that, at least. Even fourth, fifth inning, you need to have guys prepared, because it's an elimination game. And it surprised me that Lovello didn't have anyone warmed, because like that is the situation you need to have full focus on who's coming in after your starter. And Gallon was doing pretty well, but you need to have guys prepared. I mean, I know we're old enough to remember 2021 World Series Game 3, where Ian Anderson was taken out after 5 no-hit innings, and the discourse from that, and the Braves won that game. So like, you need to be prepared in those situations, even if it's going to have some scrutiny with it.
Yeah, somewhere Kevin Cash is smiling, knowing that all the scrutiny he got was unjustified, because I mean that right there, that's the alternate timeline where he leaves Blake Snell in and the Dodgers start scoring runs.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, ultimately the D-backs give up 1 run in the inning, and then 4 in the ninth inning, which was not in the cards. No, people weren't really expecting that to happen. And then eventually the Rangers end up winning. And to go back to Nathan Eovaldi's night, he was not dominant necessarily in striking guys out or keeping guys off the bases, but he allowed the right type of contact. After going 6 shutout innings, he allowed 2 batted balls out of 17 in the sweet spot zone. That's an extremely low percentage. Usually about a third of a pitcher's batted balls against are in the sweet spot. Eovaldi was only at like 13%. And then also only 2 of the 17 batted balls he allowed had 500 expected batting averages or higher. So he prevented the good type of contact that ends up getting hits, and probably a lot of the reason why he got out of so many of those jams.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, he did allow the right kind of contact when he needed it the most.
It was a solid performance. Eovaldi found different ways to get outs and get scoreless innings and whatnot throughout the postseason. Sometimes it was striking out a bunch of people. Sometimes it was getting really, really soft contact. And he just always seemed to find a way outside of game 1. Even though the Rangers won that game, he always just seemed to find a way to have a really effective performance.
Yeah, no, he absolutely did. Yeah.
I should check out the final postseason stats for Eovaldi, because only 1 bad start.
I want to say it was like a 2.95 ERA.
Yeah, that sounds about right, because I know he entered the game with a 3.52, and then he threw 6 shutout innings. 2.95 ERA and 2.98 FIP in 6 postseason starts in 2023 for Nathan Eovaldi. And this comes literally a month following maybe the worst month of his career.
Yep.
Where he had a 9.30 ERA in I think 5 or 6 starts with the Rangers. Yeah, good story there. Like just seemed to turn it on at the right time. And yeah, his playoff legacy will definitely be you know put on a up. It'll definitely be uplifted through this
Yes.
one. Corey Seager's obviously. I mean, I feel like Corey Seager now, his postseason legacy, it makes it so that it'll his Hall of Fame track is much easier. He doesn't have to get as many regular season accolades as your average player does because of how great he's been in the postseason and how effective he was in the 2 World Series that he won.
I mean, he's not even 30 yet, and he's gonna approach, 1,000 games played, 4,000 plate appearances next year. He's already got a 134 career OPS plus, 32 BWAR. Yeah, I mean, he's got a clear path for the Hall of Fame right now, and yeah, 2 World Series MVPs to go with it is huge.
Yeah, and I know we always kind of start by quantifying, a player's Hall of Fame status by their wins above replacement. It's not the only thing. It's just kind of something you start off with, and you look at like, oh, this guy has 45 and retired. Like, yeah, that's probably not a Hall of Famer. But I think when we start to see someone who we're really really considering as Hall of Fame caliber, you kind of start at like 60 wins above replacement. For Seager, with how great these 2 postseason runs have been, 2020 and 2023, I feel like that conversation is more like at 50 wins above replacement for him,
Yep.
especially if he continues to hit like he did this year. If he does this for like 2 or 3 more years, it feels like he'd be destined to go into the Hall of Fame. Um, with how he's been hitting, how he hit in the regular season this year and how he hit in the postseason in 2020 and 2023. So yeah, I mean, what other like legacies do we think are really being
Well, Bruce Bochy
yeah.
has to be. I mean, 4-time World Series winning manager. That puts him up with like Joe Torre. It puts him up with like all of the greatest managers uh in Major League history. All the guys that have been through dynasties, right?
Yeah. Whoops.
It's Walter Alston and Joe Torre tying Bruce Bochy at 4, Connie Mack at 5, and then Casey Stengel and Joe McCarthy at 7.
Yeah, and those guys were
Yeah,
like prime Yankees
yeah.
managers, I imagine.
Or A's.
Or A's, yeah. Yeah.
Philadelphia A's, by the way.
Philadelphia A's.
Yeah.
Not not
Not
no 70s dynasty A's. We're talking late 20s, early 30s.
mm-hmm.
Or
Surprised Miller Huggins isn't there.
and early 1910s with the A's. Yeah, yeah, like Bruce Bochy's legacy for sure. Like the fact that uh the first year he's there, they win a World Series. I mean,
Yup,
that's
out of retirement.
yeah.
Like it's wild.
What will be funny and extremely, extremely annoying is when the manager of the year award comes out and he's probably not gonna win it. I feel like he might win it, but I feel like Brandon Hyde
Brandon
might get
Hyde
the
probably
nod.
should get it. Yeah.
Especially like we forget when
101
these
101 games. Yeah. You forget that these awards are voted on early.
yeah, they were voted on probably like October 2nd, because that was the day after the regular
Mm-hmm.
season ended. And especially like from a writer's perspective, the Rangers had just fallen out of the um American League West and had to go into the wild card, whereas the Orioles had won the division, and after winning 83 games last year and not really doing too much in the offseason. So it probably will go to Brandon Hyde. So it'll be funny to have that,
Yeah.
conversation about, oh, should the manager of the year really be voted on in the regular season? And in my opinion, it should never be voted on. It shouldn't be an award, but
Yeah, I was say it means I don't know if there's like contracts and managers like contract clauses for managers that say like if you win manager of the year you get X number of dollars. I think yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't think I think I could do without it because it's not. People don't even really talk about it the same way that they talk about like MVP, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year. As far as legacies go, I think another one that we should not forget is Adolis Garcia. I know that he wasn't, on the roster for games 3, 4, and 5. He had an injury, unfortunately, or well, after game 3 rather. Um, but we can't forget about what he did leading up to his injury. A 1293 OPS in the American League Championship Series, and he kind of essentially like single-handedly led them to the World Series. I mean, he had a 17% CWPA and an NL and an ALCS. Like you don't see that a lot. And then obviously the walk-off home run in Game 1. Like he truly took he took over the postseason as much as one player can in baseball when he was on the field. And he did have a game-winning hit in the clinching game. He didn't have that moment, late in the series, but we can't forget what he did when he was on the field.
Yeah, for sure. From game 4 of the ALCS through game 3 of the World Series, he hit 407 with a 1574 OPS, along with a win probability added of 1.083, which is like a full win, and a championship win probability added of 34.44%. That's, by the way, ALCS game 4 through World Series game 3. He basically he gave the Rangers, according to championship win probability added, a 34% better chance of winning the World Series, which is pretty remarkable. And yeah, his I don't think Rangers fans are going to forget how amazing he was down the stretch and in the most important games for sure.
No doubt.
Especially with that walk-off home run in game 1. And it kind of sucks for him and how it's looked at that in that game where he had the 3-run homer off of Justin Verlander, they lost that one because that was a crazy important home run, but because they lost, it didn't end up necessarily meaning anything. Kind of
Yep.
sucked. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's why you have individual statistics and individual awards, because sometimes the team cannot respond to what you do. Yeah, Garcia's postseason legacy is amazing, and yeah, I think also, and you've prefaced this a couple times, is like the organizational legacy and the style of going out maybe prematurely, even to a lot of folks, include like it, what they did was premature to us for sure, in signing 3 guys in the span of
Two
two
off seasons.
years 3 guys in the span of 2 years who were worth 175 plus $1 million contracts. That's after a 62-win season in 2021, and they just don't really care and just get the guys they want, and they ended up getting rewarded for it.
Yeah. I mean, I really wonder if teams will start using that method. I say probably not. Um, but I mean, shout out to I mean Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, and Jacob DeGrom. All of them came over after pretty brutal seasons. Uh, Seeing the vision that Chris Young had, seeing the vision that the organization had put together, and I mean, it took them a year after DeGrom, 2 years for Semien and Seager, to get all the way to the World Series and to win the whole thing. Um, and I mean, I prefaced this on a couple shows ago, but shout out to Marcus Semien as well. He was the first of those dominoes to fall. I mean, he came over as the first big name. Uh, seeing, and I mean, it paid off big time. I'm sure he had an idea that Corey Seager was coming because he signed the next day. Uh, Degrom, obviously, unfortunately, he wasn't much of a factor in the playoffs, but I mean, that was another sign that this team is serious about what they're doing here. I mean, also trading for Montgomery and Scherzer at the deadline was another one. I mean, Montgomery probably went down as the best trade deadline acquisition by any team this year. A rental, a guy that made a major difference in the World Series rotation and in the playoffs entirely. That didn't really cost that much. Um, yeah, I mean, it was Chris Young made the right moves, and I mean, ownership bought in at the right time, clearly. And it was just very good execution all around in the front office.
Yeah, for sure. And good farm system development as well. With Josh Young made a big impact in these playoffs. Evan Carter, like his
Yeah,
impact cannot be talked about enough. Just a 21-year-old kid. He's rookie eligible next year. Let's not forget. And Leody Taveras also played a role. He was acquired in the Joey Gallo trade that happened in the middle of 2021. So it was a combination of the great veterans that they signed and traded for, as well as the young developing team young developing prospects that were flourishing into MLB talent. And yeah, like that was you took the words right out of my mouth in talking about their trade deadline, because yeah, it is a large reason of why they won this World Series is that trade deadline. It can't be emphasized enough the impact that Jordan Montgomery had, and they didn't really give up too much for him, if I recall myself. Also Max Scherzer, like in the 45 innings he threw for the Rangers, he had a 3.2 ERA and 3.41 FIP in the regular season with the Rangers. So
and he's back for next year.
yeah, he's back for next year and will probably be impactful for the Rangers with that. Yeah, I mean, you look at that entire starting rotation between, whether it be Montgomery, Eovaldi, Scherzer down the stretch, Dane Dunning, or Andrew Heaney. Those were all acquired by Chris Young in the last, or except for Dunning, but Heaney, Scherzer, Eovaldi, Montgomery, those were all Chris Young acquisitions in the last couple of years that were going to cost a bit of money, but they went ahead and did it. Even like John Gray, like that was an investment that the Rangers made after a 102 loss season. He's being paid $14 million a year, and they get rewarded with 3 shutout innings when Max Scherzer goes down. So it all came together. It all really came together organizationally for the Rangers.
It did. And I'm excited to see where they go from here, because I can't imagine they're just going to become complacent, because I'm assuming this model of spending big and becoming a more serious big market team was probably a more long-term plan than just, hey, we're going to win a World Series in 2 years and then we're going to, figure it out from there. Like, I'm sure they're going to be in on a lot of big free agents this offseason. Maybe not Shohei Ohtani, but like I wouldn't be surprised to go see them get or go after like a Blake Snell. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go after a Yamamoto, like, or maybe another bat. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see them just keep going and say, hey, we're gonna try to do it again. By the way,
Yeah, for
and by the
sure.
way, like obviously they didn't seem like they had a lot of trouble recruiting when they, when they when they were coming off 60-win seasons, but there's a lot more incentive for free agents to go there, when they're putting down these big time offers,
Yeah, for
because
sure.
I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a very competitive offseason with free agents. There's not a whole lot out there, but there's definitely teams that have needs. And I think, it's going to be a offseason of some big spending, and the Rangers have shown that they have no problem doing that. And I think it's going to be a lot easier for them to convince guys to come over when it's, hey, look how quickly this model worked. It's going to work again.
Yeah, I mean, the ring is definitely enough of a selling point for potential free agents. And going back to how they've given out contracts in the past few years. I mean, they've given out a lot of a lot of bigger contracts, bigger mid-level to high-level markets, with obviously Seager and Simeon, Jacob deGrom, and then going down to John Gray and Nathan Eovaldi. Like, there have been a lot of bad contracts that have been handed out in the last couple of years, where it already seems like it's blowing up in the team's face. And the Rangers don't really have that. The only example you could maybe point to is Jacob deGrom, and that's because of injury. And yes, his injury history might have been, or his injury might have been a little bit more predictable than your average player getting injured. However, still, they have him for 3 more years after this, and he had, I think, a 1.4 FIP or something like that in the games he did pitch. So it wasn't because of performance. Whereas Seager and Simeon, they paid them, they combined to give them $500 million in total value, or they're going to end up combining to pay $500 million for them. And they were both they've both been extremely good in these 2 years. They have not fallen off from their prior performance. And in fact, Seager has improved from his prior performance
dramatically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
I mean he's about to enter his prime, it feels like.
yeah, and like MVP finalist this year, probably MVP runner up this year for sure. Marcus Simeon is gonna get MVP votes most likely. He was really effective this year and pretty good last year as well. John Gray was pretty effective. Effective in the postseason. He had a 4-year, $56 million deal, and Nathan Eovaldi was signed for 2 years, $34 million. And we saw how he did in this postseason. I mean, ERA and FIP under 3, and was a lot of the reason why they won this World Series. So, like, it wasn't just that they were throwing money at guys. They threw money at the right guys, and it ended up in a World Series
Yeah, I
championship.
mean they could have easily ended up with Carlos Correa instead of
Yeah,
Seager, and one of them has been more productive than the other. They could have easily ended up with yeah, I mean someone else that hasn't
yeah.
been as effective. They could have ended up with I don't know who are some other examples.
Taiwan Walker
Taiwan Walker, Jameson Tyone instead of Jacob DeGrom, which not that one made much of a difference, but over John Gray even
over Eovaldi, like
over
Taiwan
Eovaldi,
Walker.
yeah, over Andrew Heaney,
Taiwan Walker has a higher average annual value than Nathan Eovaldi.
yeah.
Um, and so the Rangers definitely chose wisely. Like, I
Mhm.
know that Eovaldi he was injured in 2022. There were some question marks about him. Didn't know, kind of an inconsistent career throughout. Ended up this year throwing, I don't know, I think it was like 140 innings or so. 3.63 ERA, but ultimately in the playoffs was extremely necessary. So yeah, I mean it's not only spending but also smart spending on the Rangers end, and that's the only way it could have gone from 60 wins to 90 wins in 2-year span, is those contracts all seeming to work out, and that's kind of what's been happening.
Yeah, I mean it's been very efficient spending, no doubt. I know Degrom looks questionable right now. But, I mean I think it was something that they planned for.
Yeah, for sure. And whenever he does come back, I'd be surprised if his performance is significantly worse than it was pre Tommy John surgery. So yeah, the Rangers definitely organizationally, like, it'll be interesting. It's far easier for teams for owners to want to model after a team that wins the World Series by not spending too much and playing small ball, like the 2015 Royals, than if they were to model after the high spending team. Because by the way, I mean, I think all of the last, like, I don't know, 8 World Series championships have gone to teams that have spent like top 10 or like had a
Yeah.
top 10
Well,
payroll.
because here's the thing, it's easy to put like throw your hands and say like, well, like the Dodgers won the World Series this year, we can't spend like the Dodgers or the Yankees won or the Mets won, but the Rangers, that's different, right? Like that's a mid like market team that was like, you know what, we have the money, let's go out and do what we can and bring it home. And there are a lot of teams in that bracket, in that financial bracket that can do that if they want to. That now have an example that said, hey, you know what? We might not be able to spend like the Dodgers, but if we spend the right way, like we can still accomplish what they want to.
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers went from, according to Spot Track, they went from spending $95 million on the team in 2021 to $250 million on this team.
Yeah.
And we can have that conversation about how all MLB owners can definitely afford to do more.
In case you're
Typically,
wondering, the Cleveland Guardians pay or spend $98 million this year. That's how much the Rangers spent 2 years ago.
yeah, yeah, they're spending at the Guardians level.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, they spent a lot. They spent efficiently, as you to use your phrase, and yeah, it worked out tremendously for them. Um, yeah, anything more to talk about with this whole championship here?
Um, I don't know about the championship, but this is definitely something I wanted to note for the postseason. Can we talk about how much of a non-factor the pitch clock seemed to be?
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of people were concerned about, oh, like it's going to ruin the big moments. There's gonna be tense moments where you're not gonna have that time between pitches. And I paid attention during those moments to see like, okay, does it feel like this is worse with the pitch clock? And I really didn't like notice it. Like there were plenty of at bats throughout the postseason. The first one that I recognized was the Ronald Acuna Jr. bases loaded at bat in Game 4 of the NLDS against the Phillies. It was the one where he flew out to center field, and I remember thinking, okay, this is a huge moment. This is the biggest individual at bat of these playoffs. Let's see if it feels like this is too rushed. And it didn't. It would go back and watch that at bat. You probably didn't feel that way. There were some in in like, I mean, most of the World Series games, it definitely felt like that. In Game 1, if you watch the late innings of Game 1, it didn't feel that way. If you watch the ALCS Game 5 with the Astros and Rangers, if you watch NLCS Games 3 and 4 with the Diamondbacks and Phillies, there were a lot of big at bats. Go watch the John Singleton at bat in Game 7 or in Game 6, whichever game it was where the Astros lost. Like that's a moment where it's like it's everything, right? And the pitch clock didn't seem to make that much of a difference in the intensity of the at bat. And obviously the games were shorter, which is great, which is what MLB wanted. And it really didn't feel like it took away from that much of the game.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, regarding that, like, there's an easy counter to the argument of like it ruining the big moment, and like there's a lot of times there probably just in the last playoffs alone, like a lot of times where it was like bases loaded, we got 2 outs here, a single will change everything about this game, and the guy just steps off and just kind of like has his catcher come over, and like a moment that probably would not have happened, you know, with the limited step offs and everything, like a moment that probably wouldn't have happened this year. Where like, yeah, this year, like there was a good pace to it, and the fact that none of these games seemed to linger on for that long. Like there was no an example I like to talk about is the 2019 World Series Game 3, where it was a 4-1 game and it went over 4 hours long. Um, didn't have any of that this postseason. So yeah, I mean, ultimately it's another win for the pitch clock.
Yeah, there were uh 4 pitcher violations the entire postseason. I'm trying to get to see how many hitter ones there were.
And I feel like
Uh,
none of them ended in at bat.
no, none of them ended in at bat, and also like no one really cared.
Yeah, no.
Like name one of the pitchers that had a violation this postseason.
Yeah, I can't name any of them.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. And most people probably can't either.
yeah, and
Um,
it's funny to
Pitch
think
clock,
back.
yeah. The pitch clock did exactly what it was supposed to this year, and I don't really feel like it took away that much of the game.
Yeah, I mean the clinching game of the World Series ended in less than 3 hours. It's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, so and it's funny thinking back to like late February, early March, when remember that walk-off pitch violation in the Red Sox
Of
spring
course I do.
training
I was
game?
watching it live.
Yeah. And then all the complaints were like, imagine a World Series game ends like this. Like, come on, we got to get rid of this. Like, everyone overreacting. And yeah, now that it's October and there were 4 total pitch violations in what, the entire playoffs, you said?
I think so, yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
that was just pitcher ones. There was a couple batter ones, but nothing crazy happened.
Nothing crazy, nothing in a big moment. It was probably a thing where it was made it an 0-1 or a 1-0 count. And
I think there was one, and it was Max Kepler.
yeah, so
Yeah, Max
five
Kepler.
five total timer violations in many, many, many batter pitcher interactions. Everyone got used to it. I think maybe umpires gave like maybe a second of leeway sometimes, probably, but ultimately it made the quality of the game better. It made everything better.
Yeah, I mean the pitch clock, massive success based on what MLB wanted it to do. It kind of exceeded the expectations. It shortened the games. Uh, it didn't shorten the action. I mean, batting averages were up this year, right? By a whole 4 points. And it didn't make any serious Like there was like the most egregious pitch clock moment was that spring training game it was not even March yet. Like yeah, it was and it was also just like no one was even talking about it by June. Like the number of violations went down per month. Guys are getting more used to it, and yeah, I mean it did a very very good job at what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, I remember I think Passon putting out a tweet in like August or something where it was like a full day of like 15 MLB games where there was no violations at all on like, you know, thousands of pitches and
Yeah,
there were no violations. So, yeah, like ultimately a good thing. I think viewership was technically like up this year, ticket
viewership
sales
was
were
up,
up.
attendance was up. I know that there's the whole World Series thing. I think that's more of an indictment on how accessible Major League Baseball makes the games than it was the matchup and people's interest. I mean, I know that like yeah, the fact that it was Diamondbacks Rangers didn't help the World Series ratings, but uh I don't think it accounted for people on streaming services. I don't think it accounted for people on illegal sites, which I'm sure would have upped it quite a bit.
Yeah, because I remember like an article came out about that in like 2018 when it was literally the Red Sox and the Dodgers, two of the biggest market teams. And I was thinking like, yeah, sometimes I'm on the go and I'm watching this on my phone and not like and
Yeah.
this whole entire playoffs I was watching it on like Fubo, which is not like a regular cable company and probably doesn't account for the ratings the same way as like if I was on Xfinity. Like,
Not only that, but I think there's also just less people that watch TV in general. Like if you look at the world, and I'm sure this is a thing for every sport. If you look at the World Series ratings over the last like 50 years, it's been on a decline, and it's I think just because less people watch TV in general, right? Like back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like you like there wasn't a lot of baseball on, and the World Series is one of very few like chances you had to watch baseball throughout the season. So naturally, there was a lot more of an interest. Now you get 162 games a year for all 30 teams, plus even some minor league if you have MLB TV. I know the biggest issue, of course, is that you don't get your local team via streaming, but that's an entirely separate issue. Um, yeah, I'm not too drawn aback by the low World Series ratings because attendance was up this year, dramatically. Attendance was up this year. Viewership was up this year, uh, and yeah, I'm not worried. Sport's fine.
yeah, and the same thing literally is happening in the NBA and literally no
Mm,
one no one ever talks about like, man, NBA is it's falling. It's going to be a dead sport in 15 years. Like
yeah,
literally no one says that. So,
no,
um yeah, and like I think just looking at stats, I think like last year's NBA finals had like half the viewers by cable than it as it did like
yeah,
7 years prior.
yeah.
Um so and that's not a quote unquote dying sport. There's plenty of people watching the NBA. So yeah, naturally people were going to be talking about all of that, but I don't know. I'm not wildly concerned about it. Um so yeah, I think that
I
that
think yeah,
shell
I think MLB just needs to look at that and say, all right, how do we make it more accessible to other audiences? Because yeah, I mean, a lot of people use streaming. A lot of people and like a lot of people have trouble getting the games via streaming, and also I don't know if the streaming like viewers even count at
yeah.
all. So yeah, I don't think it's like, oh, baseball has a problem because like the sport of baseball has a problem because of its ratings. I think it's MLB has a problem because of its ratings. I think those are very different things.
Yeah, for sure. Like I watched, the playoffs on many different devices, whether it be my
Mhm.
TV, my laptop, my phone. And I don't know if those cable ratings account for all that. Whereas,
They
you know,
don't.
in the 1990s, everyone was watching on their television.
Yeah, because
And
that was the only thing you could do.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, you never know. You never know. Um, yeah, anything more before we wrap this up?
It is. Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, this was what season technically like 4.5 of ARR. Um,
Yes.
is that what
Our
we're
our
calling
fourth
it?
our fourth full season, our fifth full postseason.
Yeah, I mean, really third full season, but
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
true.
yeah, but I mean, it's obviously this was a very uh transitional year for us personally. Chris and I both graduated college. this year. So we're now in the post Springfield College era of ARR, and I mean we don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So uh, it's cool that we were still able to do this. If you listened at all this year, we thank you. Thank you to Foolish Bailey. Thank you to Mike Petriello. Thank you to Mark Simon and Chris Cotillo for coming on as guests here. I think that's everyone, right?
Yeah. Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah, it was another fun year of this podcast. I mean, we got another fun off season ahead. We have some obviously very interesting free agency, most notably Shohei Ohtani. We have Yoshinobu Yamamoto coming over from Japan. We have my most anticipated Hall of Fame season, maybe in my lifetime. I'm beyond excited for this one. I've been talking about it since the 2020 to 21 off season. We have Adrian Beltre on the ballot this year. We have Joe Mauer on the ballot this year. We have Chase Utley on the ballot this year. David Wright, Adrian Gonzalez, Matt Holliday. A lot of very interesting conversations to be had. It's the year that Todd Helton is going to get in. It's the year that Billy Wagner should get in. It's a year where Andrew Jones can set himself up to get in next year. It's going to be a very fun November through January for me. Maybe not for everyone, just because Hall of Fame discourse can be very draining. But you know that I live for that stuff, and this is the year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the conversation has become a little like less draining with a lot
With the
of
steroid guys being off, honestly.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
the
I mean, like, it sucks that they're not in, but I'm very okay with the fact that we don't have to talk about that anymore.
yeah, it's
People will still bring it up, and that's fine because yes, I agree that Bonds and Clemens should have gotten in, and whatever. But it's over now. I mean, it's not, and also they're not even on the era ballot this year, which that's another conversation because that's definitely a very unpredictable one. It's all managers, executives, umpires
yeah,
this year for eras.
yeah, for sure. Like yeah, so it can be a very circular conversation with that. So not
Mhm.
having to deal with that outside of like Alex Rodriguez and Manny Ramirez, who were
Yeah,
actually suspended for PEDs, like
yeah. I mean, that's a different story.
yeah, that's outside of those guys, like none of those types of players being on the ballot is it definitely takes
Yeah.
away a bad layer of it.
So
Or
Todd Helton, real quick. Todd Helton needs to gain 11 votes that he didn't get last year, which I think he will have no problem doing. I think he'll get in with at least 80% this year. Billy Wagner needs to gain 27 votes. He gained, I think, 45 last year just pre-election. So I think that'll be no problem for him. I know that he probably won't gain at the steepest rate. I think he'll take kind of the route that Scott Rowland did last year, where, he gained at a very slow rate because most of the people that, were going to vote for him already did. Um, and then, Andrew Jones missed by 66 votes last year. I don't think he's going to gain that many, but I think he could kind of do what Billy Wagner did last year, gain a lot of votes and get up to the high 60s, maybe even low 70s this year and set himself up nicely to be in a good position to get in 2025. And I know that's your guy, Chris. You're a big Andrew Jones fan.
yeah.
You're big on his candidacy. So there is a lot to look forward to. And like I mentioned, Adrian Beltre, he's going to get in this year. I'm very excited to see how Joe Mauer debuts. I'm very excited to see how Chase Utley debuts. Unfortunately, I don't think David Wright. I think he'll stay on the ballot, but not make enough traction to get in. Really sucks because he was. I mean, he's the guy where if he didn't get injured, he was there. Like he was so there. But regardless, it's going to be a very exciting year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see like how much some of these guys climb, considering there are like three really, really good candidates that are coming on the ballot. But
Yep.
I'm not sure what the percentage of ballots last year had like 10 guys on it.
I'm also just very excited for the fact that this is the first time I think in the ARR since 2020 that we've had a slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famer on the ballot because David Ortiz got in first ballot, but there was definitely some question on whether he would actually get in first year or not. I think he only made it by like 6 votes or something.
Yeah, it
But
was like
Adrian Beltre is gonna
77%.
yeah, like Adrian Beltre is gonna get 90% of the vote. He's gonna clean house on that ballot. Like there's no need to question it.
Yeah, 3,000 hit guy.
Yeah, 3,000. Yeah,
10-time
like
Gold
he
Glover.
checks every box you can imagine. A great defense, like a top five. Uh, a top five third baseman all time, but also great defensively. A very interesting career. Certainly, yeah, a 3,000 hit guy. He had the counting stats. He had 477 home runs, most of those coming in his 30s. Um, he was a fan favorite in every market that he played in. Obviously Texas, but also the 1 year he spent in Boston, years he spent in Seattle, the time he had in LA with the Dodgers. 93 WAR. I mean, that's all timer territory.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, so it'll be fun to talk about that and reminisce about Adrian Beltre's career when it comes time to talk about his career and his Hall of Fame candidacy, which is pretty overwhelming. So yeah, that'll be a lot of the off season, talking about free agency as well. We're considering kind of doing like a position by position breakdown of rankings and such, sort of like how MLB Network does it. So, and how I love like Foolish Bailey's the Foolish 50 every
50,
year.
yeah.
So it would be fun to like see where our picks match up versus his and MLB Network's, because he already compares his to MLB Network and such. So, it'll be it could be fun to do that. Yeah. So, I mean, the off season, a lot of the time is like the podcast is as quality or better in the off season based on, it's a really, really open conversation all the time. And it's a lot of hypothetical discussion because, there's nothing on the field going on, but
yeah,
there can be a lot of fun discussion to be had. So keep keep your eyes and ears peeled for ARR in the off season. It's funny to think like when we started, I think the first I think 9 of the first 10 months of the podcast was off season because it started, and then we cover the postseason, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah,
and then it was all off season. So
yeah, I think our first like debriefing a regular season episode was like episode 46.
46, yeah, 46 exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very funny how that happened.
Maybe it was like 47, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah. Or yeah, I think
it was 47 because 45 was Eddie Matthews.
Yeah. 46
was like predictions, and then 47 was my how about that is Colin Moran.
Yeah. Yeah, first how about that.
Yeah.
Very fun, very fun. So yeah, that should do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. Also follow me on social media at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Current, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoy this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking the BBWAA awards. We'll do our custom awards, and we'll also be talking about our hits and misses of our players to watch.
There were many misses. Tune in for those.
Many misses. It's going to be a fun episode next week, so check that out. We will see you then.
This conversation is over.